Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining our June Zoom meeting with the Lefty O'Doul Bay Area chapter. I'm very happy that you're able to join us. This is we've decided to do an informal meeting per se to honor our late friend Cuno Barragan. So we'll be able to, we do have a list of folks that are going to be sharing some Cuno Barragan stories in memory of him. And if anybody else had any insights or any kind of comments they wanted to reference about Cuno, we definitely wanted to make sure the priority today is Cuno and his memories and his legacy. We'll also be discussing after Cuno memories. We'll discuss the Rickwood Field game. We actually have the pleasure of being joined by somebody who spent parts of 3 seasons playing at Rickwood Field a few years ago. And then also, Briley, we know him also as a Sacramento Solons legend of 1974, the Hughes Stadium years. So we're very honored that he's able to join us. And then obviously, we wanted to have opportunity to share any memories or stories of Willie Mays following his recent passing as well. A few announcements, and we'll close in a moment of silence and Willie's memory towards the end. But I did want to have a few announcements before I pass this over to Marlene. We have the ticket link up for our meeting with Japan Ball. They've organized a gathering at the Oakland Ballers game for Saturday, the 29th. Once I'm done with my announcements, I'll put the link in the chat. But I will also be doing some carpools or a carpool from Sacramento. So if you are interested in joining us that day, there will be an opportunity for transportation, make things a little bit easier for you. But also make sure if you are interested in attending that game, you have to buy the special event ticket from Japan Ball. And again, I'm going to put that link in the chat shortly after I'm done with my announcements. Also, Dennis Mulgannon, I was able to confirm things with him for August 17th, Saturday, August 17th. We're going to have our annual Little Fenway West event, which is pretty cool place. He has a 2,000 square foot baseball museum with many different baseball artifacts dating back well over a century. He has a 25% replica wiffle ball field of Fenway Park. And then we'll also have opportunity to meet. We'll have some presentations. Currently, we have Dan Taylor, who actually wrote what was considered one of the more important baseball books of last year. I can't remember if it was the Sports Collector's Digest, some book, fairly well-known sports book review, considered one of the most important sports books of last year, where it talks about some of the challenges that baseball had in the mid 1920s. There's a couple of years where Babe Ruth kind of tailored off. Well, for Babe Ruth. And then also there was the little scandal with Ty Cobb, which resulted in him going over to the Athletics. So you had two of baseball's big stars kind of in a little bit of a lull there. So he captures that moment in baseball and kind of the rise of baseball in the late 20s as well, with the Murderers Row Yankees as well. I also have King Clausen has kind of an interesting story. He's a former professional baseball player. Now actually does a lot of memorabilia sales and baseball card sales. But when he was actually playing, to save extra money, he actually spent some time working out of a card shop, which is kind of a unique, interesting story to tell. So he kind of learned the business while he was still a player. So it's kind of an interesting, unique story. Also, Marlene will make a little bit more reference of it, but I definitely hope some folks from the Sacramento chapter will go on to SABR 52 in Minneapolis in August. Just made my reservations. Look forward to that. but I hope that others will join me as well. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Marlene at this time. She'll have some additional announcements, and then we'll get into some Cuno stories.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. And good to see everyone. Welcome to the meeting tonight. You know, I've been thinking how important the work of all you historians and authors have been, especially these last few days, and also looking at what's been happening with the Negro Leagues. If, you know, without the work of SABR and the Pacific Coast League Historical Society and other researchers and historians, a lot of these stories would be lost. So my thanks to all of you who keep this good work going. Wanted to remind you of some upcoming we have 2 more meetings scheduled this summer, Zoom meetings. On July 18th, we're going to look at women in baseball, and we're going to be joined by Kat Williams, who is the CEO of the International Women's Baseball Center. She's going to talk a bit about what's going on with that organization. Leslie Heafy, who you all know, I'm hoping she'll give us a mini women in baseball story. And then Ryan Woodward will talk about Women in Baseball Week and the Women's Baseball Heritage Trail. So I'm looking forward to hearing about all of that good work. And then on August 15th, Melissa Lefty will be talking with us about her new book, Locker Room Talk, A Woman's Struggle to Get Inside. As you remember, Melissa set a lawsuit that challenged baseball's gender discrimination habits, I guess you'd say, and sort of broke into that. And this book is a story of that court case. I, with Zach, hope that many of you will be going to SABR 52 in Minneapolis. That's in August. And then the virtual SABR IWBC Women in Baseball Conference will be September 20th through 22nd. So we'll keep sending out information about that. And if any of you do women's baseball research and are interested in presenting at that conference, they're still accepting proposals to the beginning of July. So again, thank you, Zach, for pulling this all together. I'm looking forward to hearing more about Cuno. And thanks for joining us.
All right. And I just put in the chat the link for the Japan Ball, a special event ticket for the June 29th game with the Oakland Ballers. So please make sure that you purchase your tickets again through that link as opposed to directly from the Ballers. So we'll go ahead and start with remembering our friend Cuno Barragan. Cuno, Sacramento legend, raised in the Sacramento area, became a hometown favorite with the Sacramento Solons, went to have some success with the Cubs for a couple of years. But he was more than anything else. He was a Sacramento friend who loved to share his stories, and we loved to hear them. I knew Cuno dating back to when I was literally like 14, 15 years old, so over 30 years. In fact, he was one of the first players that I interviewed. I used to go around to the Pacific Coast League reunions, and I got to become friends with a lot of the old Coast League ball players because my uncle was a player, so I kind of had a little way in there. But got to know Cuno, and I put together a newsletter on old Coast League ball players. Cuno was one of the first guys that I interviewed for that newsletter. And then nearly 30 years later, when I was putting together my book Called Up, which was about major league call-ups and debuts, Cuno was actually the first person that I interviewed. Most of us probably know that Cuno has a very unique and interesting major league debut story. I'm sure some folks will reference that. Unfortunately, his health had kind of deteriorated a little bit, and he moved in to assisted living, and I wasn't able to track him down for a release. So he's not in the book. He's not featured in the book, but it was kind of the perfect kind of full circle thing to be, to know Cuno as a teenager, as a kid, to feature him there, and then have him be my first interview for that book was very meaningful. A direct connection to my childhood and interviewing those Coast League ball players during my teen years. I wanted to, give some folks opportunities to speak about Cuno. We do have 4 or 5 folks that have been listed. And then obviously, if anybody else had any comments about Cuno, definitely they're welcome to reference those afterwards before we move on to Rick Wood and Willie May. So first off, we're going to have Mark Macrae, Director of the Pacific Coast League Historical Society, share some words about Cuno and his experience and what he meant to the Pacific Coast League Historical Society.
Well, thanks, Zach. Cuno, as a few of you know, was a very regular part of the Pacific Coast League Historical Society reunions. I first met him not in the Bay Area, but down in Southern California. And it was the better part or close to 30 years ago at Dick Beveridge's legendary reunions in Carson and later in Huntington Beach. There was a group of guys that came down from Sacramento on a regular basis. Dick Beveridge, of course, was very good friends with another one of our late friends, Bud Watkins. And Bud was sort of the guy that organized it. He was the front man, so to speak. But he brought down other guys up from the Sacramento area, initially to the reunion in Southern California, and then later on to the Oakland reunion. When the Oakland reunion first started, there were so many living Oaks and Seals players that there really wasn't a quote unquote room for any other players from different teams. I think the year that I took it over in 1998, we had 60 former players, which is hard to believe. And I won't tell you how many of them are left because we can count it on one hand, and that hand would be Mordecai Brown's hand. But Cuno, from the very start, one of the things that I do remember about him was that he was always willing to talk to people. Most of the PCL players from the golden age, pre-1958, are very approachable. They were very open and good to talk with. And after they would see you and know that you were serious 2 or 3 times, they would open up even more. I talked to Cuno mostly in general terms at the reunions when I was promoting the function in Oakland. If I was lucky, I would get anywhere between 30 and 45 seconds to talk with each person who attended. And so it made it difficult to do that. Many of the players would call me the next day, and we'd actually have an opportunity to visit for 15 or 20 minutes. But again, Cuno, how I remember him, and I'll liken him to a Hall of Famer because he played for the Cubs. And when I think of Cuno, I lump him with another famous Cubs player, Ernie Banks. And clearly their batting average or longevity with the team are not similar. But what is similar is that every single time that I saw Cuno at an event or talked with him or saw him interacting with other people, he always had a smile. And it was just like Ernie Banks. Every time I saw Ernie Banks, he had a smile. So for that, I mean, he was, again, a very regular part of our reunions. I know in later times he came to a few of the SABR functions up that Zach had hosted, Sacramento, Folsom area and such. And it was great. Again, he would come out the last few years before he started having health issues and such. His recall was pretty good. And again, very, very generous with his time. And again, that's how I remember him. There's a number of other people here, namely Tom, because Tom did the SABR biography for him, and he can probably get into some of the stats and some of the real personalized stories that he feels like sharing because he spent much more time with Cuno. And in fact, the last time I saw Cuno, it was with Tom, and we were up in Folsom. And you could see that Cuno was just starting to go through some of the issues, and thankfully Tom was there to help him out. But again, he was a very good friend of the Pacific Coast League Historical Society, and through Dick Beveridge, I'd also extend that to SABR because again, he was interested in preserving his own history, and he had a very positive outlook, and a guy that I think deserves all the attention that he can get tonight. And in fact, in the potpourri that's coming out in July, we've got a couple of different articles on Cuno as well that both Zach and Alan are sharing. And again, he's one of those guys that we're not going to forget, but we want to make sure that other people know our experiences with him were very positive, and hopefully they'll, if they don't know who he is or never met him, they'll get a better sense after talking with those who did. Thanks, Zach.
I should probably keep myself off mute, but thank you very much for your words, Mark. I definitely appreciate it. Go ahead and if you wanted to, Tom, do you want to be next, Tom Crisp, on the Cuno stories and sharing your about your friendship with Cuno and a little bit about his career?
No, I've got a whole list of stuff, so I'll kind of fill in gaps afterwards. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So let other people go first, and then whatever they don't say, I'll say.
All right. How about all right, we got Graham, we got Steve, we got Alan. Raise your hand if you're interested in being one of the first ones that share on. I see both Steve and Graham went off mute at the same time, so.
Yeah, mine is really a minor, just a little vignette, kind of in the vein of how times have changed. But some of you know I was visiting team bat boy for the Sacramento Solons in 1959. That's a picture of the 1959 ball club behind me. My picture's not in it because my folks went out of town the weekend that the picture was taken. Cuno wasn't in it either. And I think that's because that's about the time he was sold for $1 to Spokane because they had run out of catchers, and that's part of the excellent bio that Tom's written. That's on the SABR website. But anyway, a couple 3 years later, I decided, what the heck, I'll contact him, see if we can get a couple tickets for a Giants game when the Cubs come into town, because by then Cuno was up with Chicago. And I just said, you don't remember me, but we'd sure appreciate it if you could give us a couple passes. And sure enough, he gave me 2 tickets for the game. So a friend of mine and I, Bill McNulty would recognize the name, Roger Oddie, from our Highlands High School days. We were both about 14. Our folks dropped us off at the Greyhound terminal in downtown Sacramento. We took the bus to San Francisco, transferred to the bus to Candlestick, and got to see the game. Cuno didn't play that day. It was early April, but he made sure that we were able to get down to the field level and say hello and get a chance to get his autograph. I have no idea whatever happened to him, but he was just as great and charming a guy as you could ever want to meet. And can you imagine going to San Francisco by yourself if you're 14 on a bus these days? Whether you got free passes or not. Anyway, that's my little story.
Very good. Graham, did you want to share about your experience doing your senior project on the Solons and having Cuno being a large part of that?
Yeah. So I'm Graham Womack. I'm sure a lot of you guys know me. I've written a fair bit about baseball over the years, and one of the first things I did, and this was before I really started doing professional stuff. So I went to Macrae High School, which is pretty close to where Edmonds Field used to be. It's, as the crow flies, it's maybe 2 miles from there. And I was lucky enough. I've always been into baseball and tried to write term papers about baseball from a pretty young age. I had a teacher whose dad had played minor league baseball, so she let me do my senior project on the Solons, and this was spring of 2001. And so one thing I'd learned, I'm sure some of you guys probably have the Mike Mandel Giants oral history from the 70s. And one of the things he talks about in that book is how a surprisingly large number of baseball players have listed numbers. And that's something that I've carried with me all through my career. But this particular project was one of the first times really that I did that. And I want to say I remember Cuno having a listed number. I forget for one of the people I talked to on the project as well as Ronnie King, who I'm sure you guys knew as well, a former scout, incredible amount of baseball knowledge. So there's a chance I got the number through Ronnie, but anyway, worked out that I was going to go and interview Cuno. It was March 24th, 2001. So my memory is that he was living in either Carmichael or Fair Oaks at the time. So I drive on out there and I get there and nobody's there. And So I think I'm maybe sitting out there for a few minutes, and maybe 5, 10 minutes later, Cuno comes driving up, and he's got this dent in his car because I think he'd just gotten in a car accident that day. It's funny though, a lot of people you'd meet, something like that would happen, and it would not be a good day, and they would not be nice to you, and it wouldn't be a good interview. But that wasn't Cuno at all. We went inside his house. One of the things that I've always remembered from that day, I'm sure any of you guys who got to go to his house, he had these awesome stools that were made out of baseball bats. So yeah, it's basically, you could see the base that he's sitting on, and then 4 bats basically. And that's always something I've remembered, and I thought it was the coolest thing. You're not supposed to do this as a writer, but I brought an old scorebook with me. This is from 1957, and I had Cuno autograph it, which again, as a writer, you're never supposed to get autographs from people that you're interviewing. And as a professional, I would never do it. At 17, I didn't know any better, and I don't necessarily regret it. And then talked to him for my paper that I wrote. So I have a few paragraphs that I'm actually going to read where it's about Cuno. So this is just a few paragraphs. So I wrote, to Sacramento kids unable to comprehend the gist of the Solons woes, the team and its players provided real life role models. The major leagues, merely as far west as St. Louis before World War II, existed as a distant pipe dream. Remembers former Chicago Cubs backup catcher Cuno Barragan. Quote, there was a little box score in the beer union saying that Joe DiMaggio hit a home run, but who's Joe DiMaggio? Some guy who plays for the New York Yankees. We only knew the Coast League ball players, and boy, if you could make it to the Coast League, that'd be the best thing that could happen. No one thought about going to the big leagues. Growing up at 13th and Q in the 30s and 40s, Barragan and his brother could hear the PA announcer from their house. And just to give a little frame of reference, I'm sure anybody from Sacramento knows this, but 13th and Q is in a neighborhood called Southside Park, which, I don't know, maybe a mile from where Edmonds Field was, or maybe even closer. I mean, it's very, very close, because basically Edmonds was, corner of Riverside and Broadway. You follow up Riverside, and I think that becomes like 9th Street. And then, 13th and Q is very, very close. And then he said, quote, if we thought it was an exciting game, we'd walk down and get in free after the 7th inning, or hang around, parentheses, in the parking lot, and maybe catch a foul ball, parentheses, which could be redeemed for free admittance. So not a whole lot else for me to say, really. I just, Cuno was really somebody who just, early on, I had a very good experience interviewing him. He was a very nice man. I talked to him other times, at least once or twice after that, and just always a real nice and, affable kind of guy. I'm grateful that I crossed paths with him.
Thank you very much for sharing those memories, Graham. Alan, I know that you were pretty close with Cuno throughout your journey as a Sacramento baseball historian. Got to be pretty close friends with him. Go ahead and share a little bit of about your experiences with Cuno and getting to know him as a person, as a friend. You're muted, Alan, if you're trying to speak. There you go.
Okay. I don't know if you can see me or not. I don't know if that matters anyway. But yeah, I got to be pretty close with Cuno over the years. I first met him about 25 years ago or so at a Pacific Coast League reunion. And, being from Sacramento, I was very interested in finding out more about Cuno. Also, I remembered going to Solons games with my dad in the late 50s. And Cuno caught a lot of those games, and I remember telling him that I just loved watching the catcher, because all that action there, lots of dust and action at the plate, so to speak. And he thought that was pretty interesting. But that was my memory of him being all dirty and dusty, and he thought that was funny. But that's one memory. Another one is one time you guys probably know that. I put him in my book Gold on the Diamond. I did a biography of him in my book. And then later, in my collecting of Sacramento Solons artifacts, I found a Cuno Barragan baseball bat with block lettering, which is probably when he played in the minor leagues. It was game used. And so I called him up and I said, hey, Cuno, I got one of your game used bats over here. Would you mind signing it for me? And he goes, well, if it's my bat, it can't be that game used. Not only was he very friendly, but he was very self-effacing. Yeah, just a great guy to know. But probably, I know Tom's got a lot of stories coming. I'm hope he's going to talk about the scoreboard issues where Cuno got to be in the scoreboard. But my last story, I'm just going to keep my presentation brief, is that one time when the Cubs were playing not Atlanta in those days, but the Braves, um, there was a big brouhaha on the field. And of course, everybody was kind of obligated in those days to rush out and get some action. And Cuno runs out right behind the pitcher's mound. And who does he run right into but Hank Aaron? And so he looks at Hank and Hank looks at him. And Cuno did the only thing he thought he could do. He just went over and he wrapped Hank up in a bear hug, and they danced around till it was all over and never laid a punch on each other. And they both appreciated the fact that nobody got hurt, at least in their little circle. So that's pretty much my last little story on Cuno. I'm looking forward to Tom did a lot more research since those days, and so I'm looking forward to hearing what Tom's got to say as well.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much, Alan. All right, well, that will bring us to Tom, and then after Tom, anybody could share their little tidbits of Cuno stories afterwards. But thank you very much for joining us, Tom. I appreciate it. I know that
My
for those
pleasure.
that aren't aware, Tom was the one that actually did Cuno's BioProject and was very close with Tom throughout that process. So go ahead and share a little bit more about Cuno, your friendship, and some stories from his career.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, right now on my plate of several projects that I'm working on is a game report of his first game where he hit a home run. So just a couple of things. I got to know Cuno through Alan O'Connor, who hooked me up with the Bagel Boys that met at a Noah's Bagels off of Marconi, and since then has met several different places. And at that time, we probably hit, when I first joined in 2012, there were about 12 to 14, mostly old ball players. We met a group of us met last Monday, just this current Monday, and there were 3 of us there. There are a few more, and hopefully they'll show up in the next coming weeks. So yeah, so I got to know Cuno. Everybody says what a nice guy he is, and he is, and he was. He also had a kind of a tough side to him, and I saw that a few times as well. I think it was from growing up. His dad died when he was 2. His mom died when he was a teenager, and so he was basically raised by older brothers and sisters. So a couple of things that I want to mention about Cuno. One is that he was sold 3 times for $1. It was because other teams needed a catcher to fill in for an injured player. They couldn't just loan him, like from the Solons to who else was that? That was Portland to Spokane. They couldn't loan him, so they had to actually sell him for $1 and then sell him back for $1. If you look at the bio of Cuno Barragan, his getting to the major leagues is an absolute miracle. When he went to school, he went to college at Sacramento Junior College, now City College, and he wasn't getting to play very much on the baseball team, so he quit. He quit school. He went to work for Fisher Tile, and for years I used to tell him, "Hey, if you had stayed with that, you'd be the tile king of Sacramento." But his deal was he had a car. He needed to make some money, but what happened? Well, one of the amazing things that happened over his rise to playing in the major leagues, he was friends with a couple of guys who were playing football at St. Mary's College, and what happened is St. Mary canceled their football program, and if it wasn't for that, Cuno never would have played professional baseball. His buddies convinced him to go back to Sacramento Junior College, where he played football and was the MVP of the team, and also to play baseball. And then after a variety of other unique experiences and events, ends up playing in the major leagues. Just a couple other things. Okay, so most of you know that he played his first game on September 1st in 1961. During spring training for that year, he was all set to be like one of the main catchers. They had a bunch of different catchers. That was back in the era of the College of Coaches for the Cubs. And if you're not sure what that is, do the research. It was around that time. They rotated coaches to be managers. Anyway, during spring training, Cuno broke his ankle. So he went home, healed up a little bit, then joined the Cubs later on. And before September 1st, his job, what he told me, was he would be stationed up in the scoreboard with a pair of binoculars. And his job was to steal signs, and by pressing a button to either put a red light on or some other light, he would transfer to the batter what the pitch was going to be. So then it comes to excuse me, September 1st, he's finally, that's when you can bring up the other players. So he starts in the first game on September 1st. It's playing against the Giants, and in the second inning, he's batting behind Andre Rogers, who used to play for the Giants. Anyway, Andre Rogers hits a 2-run homer. So right after him comes Cuno. And people have asked Cuno before, well, how did you feel going, for your first at bat? Well, there was such a excitement for the Andre Rogers home run that because the Cubs were not very good. And so a 2-run lead was impressive. And so he said it was no big deal. So he gets up there on the second pitch off of Dick LeMay. He hits a deep shot. He thinks it's going to be a double. So he's sprinting around towards second base, and then he sees that the umpire is signaling a home run. He started laughing because he could not believe it. So later in that game, he grounded out twice, and the Giants ended up winning in, I think, 10 or 11 innings, 4-3. When you ask Cuno about what was exciting for him and what is memorable for him, one of the things was he had a .333 batting average against Sandy Koufax. He played in one game against him. He said, first time up, 3 fastballs, 3 strikes, I'm out. Second time, 3 fastballs, 3 strikes, I'm out. Third time, 2 fastballs, 2 strikes. And he's thinking, I'm toast. Koufax comes in with a curve. Cuno hits it. So he bats .333 against Hall of Famer Sandy Koufax. He also played in 1962. He was the starter in the first game for the Houston, at that time, Colt 45s. And it wasn't at the Astrodome because that hadn't been built yet. So he played in the first game for the Houston Ball Club. What's the next one? Oh, in 1963, on October 12th, after the season was ended, he was asked to catch in the Latin American all-star game that was held at the Polo Grounds and was supposedly the last major league type game at the Polo Grounds. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's what I was told. And he was he was not an all-star, but he was Latin America type player, and there were not very many Hispanic catchers back in those days. Last thing I want to mention is some of the things that you may not know about him. One is that after he retired, he was a ski patrol member up in Tahoe for 13 years. And lastly, this is the Pericos de Puebla. In between, let me see, what was the year on that? In between 1957 and 1958, he wanted to go down and get a little bit more experience. Didn't want to play Winter League in California, so he goes down there, and he didn't last very long before he broke his finger. So that wasn't a great experience for him. Oh, last thing, and this has nothing to do with baseball. There's a guy named Ernesto Galarza, who is kind of a precursor to Cesar Chavez in terms of a labor organizer and kind of a backer of the migrant workers. Ernesto Galarza, if my research has been productive, Cuno is related to him. I think it was a stepbrother. In Cuno's family, the ages were all kind of all over the place. His nephew, Dick Alejo, he was not that much younger than Cuno. So anyway, that's it, unless anybody has questions about anything.
Thank you very much for sharing those memories of Cuno. Those are some great insights. I did want to give, before we move on to Rickwood and May's memories, did want to give folks any, if they had any memories of Cuno that they wanted to share, that they'd be able to at this time. Okay, well, that again, I'm glad that we were able to gather and share those memories of Cuno. Again, I just wanted this to be kind of an informal, Zoom gathering where we're able to, talk about our late friend. All right, well, we'll go ahead and move on to today's Rickwood Field game. And we actually are joined by somebody who spent parts of 3 seasons playing for Birmingham at Rickwood Field in the late 60s. A Sacramento-grown guy, went to Highlands High School, went American River College, I think even, and then entered the A's system, spent some time at Rickwood Field, and then also, as I had referenced earlier, was inaugural Hughes Stadium Solon in 1974, had a great season with them. He has reference that he's willing to come back and join us as a featured presenter, but today we wanted to talk about some of his Rickwood Field memories, and tell me a little bit about your I think you're still a teenager, right? And you're grew up in Sacramento area, and what is your second year, maybe your third year of pro ball, and you're playing for Birmingham A's. Reggie Jackson's on the team, and kind of tell me about going down to the South Birmingham and your first impression of that historic stadium.
Yeah, can you hear me all right? Can you see me all right? Am I on the screen? Okay.
Yeah.
Is Steve Heath still there? He's there. He get off?
I'm here, Bill.
That's my high school basketball teammate. Steve, he played a lot of basketball with him.
There were two of us. One of us was a good basketball player, and the other was me.
I was thinking of you yesterday. I was watching the Olympic swimming trials, and I was thinking that you're a swimming official there locally, and I enjoyed it.
Kind of fun to see some of the swimmers I've had in my lanes qualifying for the Olympics, like Luca.
Yeah.
Anyway, great to see you.
I don't want to get off the track here for Zach, but my sister's boyfriend in high school, at least 1 year, was Mike Burton. And he won the gold medal in Mexico for, I don't know, 1,000,000 meters or something. He said he had to swim like 2 hours just to get tired, if you recall him. But
I
anyway,
interviewed him for a Sacramento Bee story last year. Sorry to
interrupt. Back to you, Zach. Your question about I played in Birmingham 67, 68, 69. Charlie Finley bought the Kansas City A's. Charlie Finley was from Birmingham, and he liked to put his prospects in that town, more so even than AAA. It was AA, Southern League. So he ran a lot of nice players through the Birmingham A's. They didn't call it the Barons back then, but Rick Woodfield was there. It was at that time maybe 60 years old, close to it. And there was some famous people that your membership would recognize. With Raleigh Fingers was there, and as you mentioned, Reggie was there. Tony La Russa was there, and Dave Duncan, Joe Rudy, Gene Tennis, Vita Blue. So there was a lot of good players that went on to the big leagues, and some of them, a couple of them even made the Hall of Fame. So that was quite an experience. I know that Reggie, during this show I just watched, Reggie mentioned about hitting a home run to right field. I was on deck when Reggie hit that ball, and he didn't build it up, but he hit that ball over that right field roof, and it landed on the railroad tracks out there. And that ball went a long ways, and he was just a kid too. He had to be 19 or 20 or something like that. But I did see him one time up at the Mariners game. I'm living in the Seattle area, and I said, I remember that. I said I might be the only one still left alive that remembers that, but I do. Let's see what else. It was my first introduction really to white bathrooms and colored bathrooms. White water fountains and colored water fountains. And Birmingham might have been the last one to give into civil rights. Back in those days, George Wallace was the governor, and things were pretty tough back there. And I kind of felt sorry. We didn't have a lot of black guys on the team, but the ones that were on there really went through tough times with where to eat and where to sleep and things like that. But I remember one day getting back to baseball. Baseball is opening day. Raleigh Fingers are opening day pitcher. I'm playing third base. Light hitting shortstop comes up for the other team, Art Miranda. Raleigh throws the first pitch of the game, and Art Miranda hits a line drive right back at Raleigh and hits him right in the cheekbone and drops him. And he was out for like 2 months with a broken jaw, teeth knocked out, both eyes black. And he had his mouth wired shut, had to eat through a straw. And but anyway, he recovered the next year and had a good year. And not sure when he went to big leagues, maybe 1970, maybe 69. But that's one memory I have of Rick Wood. I also remember that in '69, the Southern League All-Star game was played there, and the Atlanta Braves came in to play the All-Stars. I made the All-Stars as a first baseman. And here it is, the first inning. Third hitter was Hank Aaron. Now, Hank Aaron, I used to use his bats in high school with his signature on it. Well, he gets up there and they walk him. And I'm playing first and I'm looking, and here comes Hank Aaron right at me. And I didn't even know. I forgot all about baseball. And I just reached my hand out and I said, I have one of your baseball bats from high school I used to use. And he says, I hope you got some hits with it. And that was a big thing for a kid to meet him. And, you know, he was another guy from Alabama. He's from Mobile, Alabama. At the same time, Willie was from Birmingham. But very, very neat. I ended up, as a sidebar to this, hitting the ball over that clock on that scoreboard in left field, and they picked me as the MVP of that game. So I still don't think I have the, I don't know what they gave me. But anyway, I remember one time I was downtown Birmingham with a couple guys. They happened to be black. They were from Los Angeles, Bobby Brooks and Dwayne Anderson. And also I was with a Latin guy. So we wanted to go to the ballpark. We're shopping and we're downtown and we want to go to Rickwood Field. And so we get on the bus, and the bus driver said, back to the bus for you guys, except me, back of the bus. And so we put up a little bit of a argument there. These guys were from California. They're not used to this Alabama stuff. And he said, back of the bus. And he was firm. He stood up and he pointed. And the one guy said, well, I'm not black. I'm Puerto Rican. And the bus driver said, in that case, get off the bus. And so all of us got off the bus and took a taxi cab down there. But that was kind of shocking to a California kid that never ran across anything like that where we played. But yeah, John McNamara was our manager there, Sacramento kid. And so, but if you have any questions about it, I spent a lot of time there. You know, our general manager's name was Paul Bryant. His father was Paul Bear Bryant. Paul Bear Bryant, most famous man in the South, would come to our games, and he would come in the locker room and he would talk to all of us. And it was quite a treat to be around him. So, but let's see. I just have one note. Steve Heath, you might know this guy, but this guy called me, and he's writing a book about Hughes Stadium. 2024 happens to be the 50th year anniversary. This guy said he worked for maybe the Union, maybe the B. He knew Jim Jenkins very well, so I'm thinking it's the Union. I don't know. Paul Baumann. And he's written a couple books, one about a tennis star, Andre Agassi. But he should be through with that book anytime because he wants to get it out 50 years. But he lives out in Rio Linda area somewhere.
Right.
So,
were breaking up.
any
I didn't
questions,
hear his
Zach,
last
or
name,
anybody
Bill.
else about baseball in the South? Because I spent 3 years, actually got called to the big leagues while I was playing for Birmingham A's.
I was glancing at the baseball reference while you were talking just to see, because I didn't realize there were so many great players on those teams. But one name that surprised me was I saw that Darrell Evans was actually like on the
Yeah,
team.
you're right. You're right. That's a good homework you did there. He did come in. He was drafted by the A's, I believe, and he came in and they slid him. I was actually playing third base, and I think that's the reason I moved to first base. They put him right at third base, and left-handed hitter, and you could tell he could really hit. Not that he ended up with such a good average, but he hit the ball hard a lot, and everyone thought that he had a future. And then suddenly he was gone. He wasn't there very long at all. And I don't know where he went off to. It seems to me Detroit, or I know he ended up with
I saw that he was a Rule 5 pick and he went to Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta or something. Yeah, good guy. I remember him, but really nice swing on him.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you very much for joining us and sharing those Rickwood stories. That's great. Any other questions about Rickwood, or any other questions for Bill? And again, we'll have him back as one of our featured presenters one of these days, so he can tell us a little bit more about his upbringing and everything like that, and his Sacramento Solons years. But any
well, yeah, Rickwood Field is not in the best part of town, and I had a real nice car, and I got called to the big leagues. They don't care if you have a car or you have a house or you have kids in school, you're going. And so I had a real nice car, and so I turned to Bobby Brooks, who's from San Pedro, California, and thinking into the season, maybe he can drive it home for me. And he said he would. Well, then at the end of the season, he gets called up to the big leagues, and my car's there in not a good neighborhood. And so Paul Bryant, the general manager, parked it inside the fence and eventually timed it where he drove it halfway across the country. And I think I was going to American River College and I couldn't leave, so I hired one of my friends to fly down and drive the car all the way back. But yeah, that was a scary part of town, but probably didn't think that much of it back then as I would right now.
Yeah. Interesting. Any other questions of Bill on Rickwood Field?
One other question I'd ask is, just given all the talent that was on the teams that you played on in those years. I mean, I know the Kansas City A's had really struggled. Was it pretty clear, like when you were on those teams, like was there a feeling kind of among the organization that like the team was on its way up?
Oh yeah, that's a real good question. And Kansas City A's were surrounded by excellent scouts. Sacramento, it was such a hot spot for talent. Scouts could actually live in Sacramento and not have to drive very far to go see a kid that could play. And I'm sure it's still that way from San Francisco on up, just like Southern California would be a hot spot. But yeah, they had some great scouts, and I actually signed before the draft with the Kansas City A's. So I was like a free agent, not even knowing it, but any scout could sign you if you wanted to sign. And so my dad used to play for the Solons and the Seals and other teams, leagues. And after the war, and he knew this one scout. Well, he knew most of the scouts actually in the area, but he knew this one scout, Don Preece, and Don called and said, "Can I come over and talk to you?" And he said, "Yeah." And then he came over, and he brought John McNamara. He introduced him. This is one of our managers in the minor leagues. This is John McNamara. And they came in the house, and they were very persuasive, getting back to your point, that, Bill, don't think of the Kansas City A's. We're moving to Oakland in 68. By then, you will be ready for the big leagues. You're going to play in front of your friends and your family. Well, that was kind of dynamic kind of conversation. And so we were convinced, and sure enough, they were stockpiling all these guys, and it took a while. It took like maybe 6 years. But I remember, or my dad said, as they're going out the door, my dad said, "Where are you going next, Don?" And Don says, "Tomorrow I'm going down to Modesto to sign a kid named Joe Rudy." And so Joe was exactly my age, graduated, what's their big high school down there in Modesto? But anyway, he signed, and Joe and I, we went in the Marine Corps together. Vietnam was really getting bad, so we didn't want to get drafted. So we joined the Marines, and we spent 6 months in the Marines. We had Rick Mundy, Dave Duncan, myself, Joe. There were a couple other guys I can't remember. But we came out at the end of March, Marines, and in time for training. And we made meetings for 6 years. It's tough to make those meetings and play baseball. You come back, you're kind of off. You've been flying around the country to these meeting places. Birmingham to Sacramento for a weekend meeting. So you're wiped out of 4 days. And so, but anyway, yeah, good question. It was Charlie Finley that did that. People badmouth him, but he was a visionary, and he hired some good scouts, and it turned into 3 championships. He just should have kept them all together and paid them whatever they wanted, and they might have won 4, 5, 6.
Very good. Any other questions for Bill on Rick Wood and his time in Birmingham before we move on to any May stories anybody wants to share?
Well, Bill, I have a quick question for you, and it's actually an artifact that I have here at my side. Let me grab it. Is this the style of jersey that you wore when you were down there?
It looks very familiar. Yeah. The sleeveless ones. When you're in the minor leagues, you get the hand-me-downs. So
right.
that was probably a big league uniform at one time.
That's 100% correct. It started its life with the Kansas City A's, and then it worked its way down after 1966. It worked its way to Birmingham, and then when the franchise was moved in the mid 70s, all the leftover jerseys came back to the Oakland Coliseum. As you know, working for Finley, he was known to stretch the value of $1. It's reported that when his nickels started to wear out, he'd put them in the drawer and wait for the wool to grow back in the buffalo, and then that way he'd get more value out of it. But these jerseys, when you see a lot of these photos, the jersey might have originated in the 1960s and was still being used in the organization a decade later.
Yeah, that number 7 you have is my favorite number. I liked it because Mickey Mantle wore it, and he was kind of my big league hero. And then and then a first rounder, first pick guy come along and grabbed it, Rick Mundy, who turns out to be my buddy. And yeah, number 7. Whenever I could get it, you don't always, the equipment guy doesn't always give you the number you want. It's whatever's available. And Rick got that, and he kept that probably all the way through his career.
This one started out, I'll just keep a minute on this to give you the info on it since you mentioned that. It started out in 1964, but it was not assigned because in 64, Rocky Colavito wore number 7 the entire season, and he wouldn't fit into this jersey. It's a smaller size. In 65, it wasn't assigned because it was Jim Landis, and Jim Landis was the same size as Colavito. Neither of them would have fit into it anytime after junior high. In 1966, however, Ernie Fazio from my area, San Leandro, wore the number. And so it's even though it's a 64 jersey, it was finally used by Fazio in 66, and then it was passed down in the organization, which was very, very common in those days.
Yeah. Yeah. Numbers, ball players are super, and, is it just kind of weird, but numbers is a big deal. I remember Tony La Russa managing the A's. He had a player, a regular, I think he might have been a catcher. He was wearing number 3, and La Russa called him into the manager's office and said, I want you to give up your number. And he said, who'd we get, Skip? He said, who'd we get, Skip? Babe Ruth? And he said, no, we got Harold Baines. And the guy said, as long as I can have a number, that's the way most ball players feel. If I can have a number, it's fine.
Very nice. All right. Well, we're a little over the hour, but if anybody has any last question for Bill, remember we will have Bill back sometime, hopefully later this year, to share even more stories of his time with the A's and the Solons and growing up in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I find they get better. I find they get better the older I get.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening, Bill. Well, that'll bring us to the last thing, and this was obviously not planned, but with Willie Mays passing, and we'll close with a moment of silence for Willie. And but is there anybody that wanted to share any stories or any memories of Willie Mays? And I'll go ahead and I'll just do a few. I mean, Willie Mays was my dad's favorite player as a kid. The interesting thing about my family is I actually come from a divided baseball family. I come from a line of actually Dodger fans. Somehow my dad chose the Giants. He was just fascinated by Willie Mays at that particular time. Thank God, because otherwise I could be on the side of evil right now, but I'm not. But I say that kidding. I have a love-hate thing for the Dodgers, but because of Willie Mays, that's one of the reasons why my dad became a Giants fan, and ultimately I chose the different path than my extended family. That my dad kind of passed down that Giants the Giants being the family favorite team, at least on my side. And that probably wouldn't have happened without Willie Mays. He was born a few years before I was born. But in the early 90s, the Giants would actually have old timers games where they would bring back the Giant stars of the 60s and 70s. And I got to see Willie Mays play in a few old timers games back then. And he's probably his early 60s at the time, but at least once each year, he wouldn't let the crowd, he had to make sure he hit at least one home run for the crowd, which was pretty impressive for somebody in his early 60s at the time. So never saw him in a real game, but I am very lucky that I was able to, see him take a few balls deep at Candlestick Park many years later. So, anybody else have any memories of Willie Mays that they would like to share this evening before we close in memory?
I have that, Zach. I'll tell this one quick story, and then I got to get going. But in 1973, I was playing AAA Tidewater for the Mets. As you remember, the Mets got Willie from the Giants. Actually, the Mets won the World Series that year. Amazing. But so we're in the International League, and there is off day in the big leagues, and the New York Mets are traveling to Tidewater, Norfolk, Virginia, to play an exhibition game against Tidewater team. And they have a beautiful park there, big park. And Willie says, I don't want to play. He's talking to maybe not the field manager, maybe the general manager. He says, I don't want to play. And the guy said, Willie, all these people came here to see you play. So there's maybe 10, 15,000 people there. And he said, okay, I'll do one at bat. I'll lead off. Put me lead off. So he gets up there. The game starts. I'm playing first base, and Bob Apodaca, who ends up eventually being the Mets pitching coach down the road, he's our best pitcher, and he's starting the game. And he winds up and he throws the ball to Willie. Willie hit that ball so far over the scoreboard in left field. I think it's still going. He just saw one pitch and yanked it out of there. So he's running down first base, and I'm going, oh my gosh, here comes Willie Mays. And I just stuck out my hand and shook his hand. Now, I'm not sure. That was in the summertime. I'm not sure. That might have been his last home run. It was certainly one of his last home runs. It might not have been official, but so he runs around the bases, touches home plate, throws his helmet in the air, and runs right in the tunnel. Just waves to the crowd. So he was done in like 10 seconds. That's my Willie.
That's an awesome story. That's an awesome Mays story. I know nobody else can beat that, but are there any other stories that you have of Mays watching him or meeting him? Anybody else before we close in his memory? Okay. And all right, we'll go ahead and close. Again, we will. I loved having you join us, Bill, and sharing some stories. I look forward to hearing more stories when we're able to, figure out a time later on, this fall or possibly winter to have you back.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Count on that if I can. They get better with beer.
Appreciate that. All right. Well, just in closing, I did want to just, this wasn't planned. This was going to be a, informal gathering to, speak about our late friend, which is, a sad occasion to begin with, and then obviously with Willie Mays passing just a few days ago, it's even more sad. But just wanted to just take a moment of silence as we close and just wrap things up. So go ahead and do that at this moment. Okay. In the memory of the great Willie Mays and our friend Cuno Barragan, we'll go ahead and end this meeting, and look forward to you joining us for our next meeting in July. Have a good evening, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.